Elephant Man Podcast Network, grown man conversation dealing with elephants in the room. Oh, it's always a technical difficulty on this place, I tell you. Elephant Man Podcast Network, grown man conversation dealing with elephants in the room. It's your man DB. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so you can know when new material is coming out. All right. IG, Elephant Man underscore podcast. Facebook, /Elephant Man podcast. And on YouTube, type in Elephant Man Podcast Network. Subscribe, like, share. And yeah, it's going to be all good. What's going on, everybody? Blessings to you all. Shalom, shalom. Hopefully, you all are doing well. We're just going to just share something real quick about the stolen artifacts. Is it preserving world's history, or is it a case of what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine? Let's get into this real quick. It's very, very interesting, and I want to hear your points on it. Let's check this out real quick.
This is the British Museum. It's the world's largest world history museum, and it draws millions of visitors every year. Inside, it holds more than 8 million cultural and historical artifacts from all over the world, which cover 2 million years of human history. If you follow the museum's recommended list of don't miss items, you'll see its star pieces. Like this Easter Island sculpture that's about 1,000 years old, or this bronze sculpture of the Hindu god Shiva. But there's a problem hidden in the museum, and we can see an example of it along this route. Out of those 12 pieces, nearly half have disputed ownership. The British Museum claims those pieces belong there, on display for the world to see. But in recent years, many have been fighting to get them back to where they came from.
The list of disputed museum treasures keeps on growing.
Should cultural artifacts return to their home countries or be left in Western museums?
The subject of intense debate as to who should now own them.
Let's start with some context. In the late 1600s, the British Empire began expanding across several continents. It became the largest empire in history, controlling about a quarter of the world's land and population. During its centuries-long rule, the empire took precious resources and wealth from countries all over the world, including cultural and historical artifacts, many of which ended up here in the British Museum, which was founded in 1753 and kept growing to accommodate all the new pieces in its collection. Lots of the items in the museum were legally acquired and are completely undisputed, like this one, a 2,000-year-old Roman vase sold to the museum by a duke in 1945. The problem is with the pieces that are disputed, like the first item you see as soon as you walk in, the Rosetta Stone, taken by British troops from the French in what is now Egypt. Or further in, the Parthenon sculptures, removed from the Acropolis in Athens by a British lord and sent to the British Museum. Or over here, on the floor dedicated to African art, the Benin Bronzes, some of the most contentious items in the museum. The Benin Bronzes are kind of hard to categorize because they include such a huge range of items, from engraved ivory tusks to brass sculptures to plaques. But they were all produced here, in the Kingdom of Benin, in present-day Nigeria. This wealthy and industrious kingdom produced thousands of objects and art pieces starting in the 1500s. A lot of the items adorned palace walls and were used for religious rituals, but they weren't just decorative.
There were visual archives of the kingdom in a society that did not develop written script as we know them.
That's Professor Chika Okeke-Agulu, an art historian and professor from Nigeria who teaches at Princeton University.
They told their history, how they narrated the histories of kingship, of the kingdom, its political and social life.
But in 1897, Benin would lose thousands of these cultural pieces. At the time, European colonial powers were expanding south in what was called the Scramble for Africa. They split up the continent into spheres of influence for financial exploitation. All these pink areas were the British ones. Benin, over here, was in Britain's sphere of influence. But the kingdom didn't comply with Britain's trade demands. And in January of 1897, it led to what was called the Benin Disaster, where Benin guards killed 7 British emissaries, plus their many guides and servants. In response, 1,200 British troops embarked on a mission called the Benin Punitive Expedition. The British wanted revenge, but the mission was about more than just that.
There were reports of these vast treasures in the palace of the king of Benin, and that if they could retrieve these treasures, sales from it could offset the cost of the invasion. This was all well planned. And so the punitive expedition, in other words, was also an economic enterprise.
The British soldiers, armed with machine guns, conquered the city and burned it to the ground, but not before carefully taking thousands of artifacts. They piled them up neatly, photographed them, and even labeled them loot. This photo, taken at the Benin Palace after the raid, shows soldiers with the dismantled plaques that were brought to the British Museum and sold all over the world. And after hundreds of years, the once prosperous kingdom was gone. The region fell under full British colonial control until 1960, when Nigeria, including the city of Benin, gained independence. But even though they were finally free, their historical artifacts were still spread all over the world, locked up in Western institutions like the Leipzig Museum of Ethnology in Germany and the Quai Branly Museum in Paris, and, of course, the British Museum.
1995, in London. That was my first time of seeing an original ancient Benin artwork. Was, yes, at the British Museum. Being in the presence of these magnificent objects and knowing that I had to travel all the way from Nigeria to see for the first time these objects, it was a mixture of pride in the achievement of these ancient artists and anger mixed with a sense of loss at what could have been if I only had to travel a few hundred miles. But at this point, you're limited to those privileged like me who could get a visa to travel all the way from Nigeria to England to encounter these objects. Most Nigerians will never see them.
In March 2000, Benin's royal family tried to change that. They officially requested all cultural property illegally taken be returned to the rightful owner. But for the most part, the British Museum has ignored any requests. The museum is restricted by a government act that prevents it from returning objects, but it has also made its stance clear. In July of 2020, the British Museum told Vox, "We don't restitute, but we are absolutely committed to lending as widely as possible, including to Nigeria. The museum's foundational value resides in its breadth, scale, complexity, and unity, and as such is a true library of the world." Chika doesn't see it that way.
The British Museum still behaves like a colonial museum. You cannot claim to be an encyclopedic collector of stolen objects.
But some are starting to reckon with this history. In 2014, the grandson of this British soldier from the 1897 Benin Punitive Expedition returned these 2 items he had inherited to the Benin royal family. And in 2007, the Benin Dialogue Group was formed. Western museums that hold the bronzes and Nigerian government representatives have been discussing potential solutions ever since. But as of today, none of the bronzes have been returned. But this is just one story. This legacy is bigger than the Benin Bronzes. There are hundreds of contested items in the British Museum, with their own rich histories and with original owners trying to retrieve them. But the problem is even bigger than the British Museum. It's a legacy of centuries of colonial power, that repeats itself again and again with different artifacts in different museums, because these requests aren't just about items. They are also about cultural and historical identity and who gets to own it.
This is a long-term project. It may last beyond my own lifetime, but the point is that it's now to start that process. We cannot wait any longer for a next generation to even begin the necessary task and project of cultural reconstitution.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting. They've been in possession for years, hundreds of years, going around colonizing the world and taking the stuff, and what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. I just think that's very interesting. First off, that it said they got a government act that they created in 1963 that it say, look, we know it's yours, but we loan it to you. You can borrow it, you can look at it, but it's still ours. Unbelievable. And then also the Benin Bronzes. If you think about, if you look at, if you've been following along, that the Ouida, the tribe of Ouida, or tribe of Judah, that was that area where they got that from. They said it was a very prosperous tribe and different things down there, and so that's one of the places where the kingdom of Judah, with the kingdom of Benjamin and some Levites migrated to. That's why you look at some maps, it's called the slave map. You know what I mean? And so they went down there, rape, pillage, burn up, blow up, all that, and then take it. You know what I mean? And say, look, they took the L, then they came, Britain took the L, then they came back in there with some more higher power weapons and took over. What y'all think about that, man? Should they be returning these items, or should it just, that's just bygone? Let bygones be bygones. And that's kind of interesting too, even like with slavery or whatever. They say, you know what? I didn't put your people in slavery, but the question is, you're not making amends for it. You're not trying to have no restitution for it. You just like, okay, well, but you still benefit from it. You know what I mean? And I gotta watch how I say that, because some folk will be, he just some negative preacher who got away from preaching the gospel. You know what I'm saying? You get labeled a lot when you hurt and sad or whatever, because you bring it up. You know what I mean? But truth, bringing truth to power. You know what I mean? We're not harping on it. It's just very interesting talks, right? A lot of those British families got money. They got wealth. They got power. They got a lot of stuff off the back of somebody else. Got somebody else's stuff. Now, just really think that that's very, very interesting. They said 83,000 works. 83,000 works were stole, man. I just like, boy, that's some crazy joints, man. But you can borrow it. You can borrow what we stole from you. And I ain't trying to demonize no situation. It is what it is. It's public record, and they don't want to let go of it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's very, very interesting thing how folk can just take your stuff. And then come today, it's very, very, another thing that's interesting to me, I use that word a lot, where they say BLM, they're just trying to change stuff. They want to burn, loot. BLM stands for burn, loot, and murder. Really? Not saying I'm an advocate for BLM, but you're going to say BLM mean burn, loot, and murder. It's what you've been doing for over 600, 700 years. But again, I digress, because I start saying stuff like this, and folks saying I'm bitter and I'm negative and I got whatever. They give me all kind of labels when I start bringing out the truth. And I just do stick to the gospel and turn the other cheek. And, I get all my artifacts back when I go to heaven. You know what I'm saying? When I get raptured up to heaven. Anyway, Elephant Man Podcast Network, Grown Men Conversations, dealing with elephants in the room. Subscribe, like, share. I might lose some subscriptions off of this one, but it's okay. That's not why I do what I do. Subscribe on YouTube /Elephant Man Podcast on Facebook and Elephant Man __ podcast on IG. So till next time, shalom.